Liam Thompson squinted through the windshield, his headlights cutting weakly through the snow swirling in thick, frosty curtains. Christmas Eve in a small town, quiet, subdued, and nearly deserted. He'd been driving all night, making deliveries for Gallows Courier Service, but after a long shift, he was just about ready to quit. If his boss had been less insistent, he might have left already. The phone on his passenger seat lit up with an incoming call. It was Dean, his supervisor. Groaning, Liam pressed the speaker button. Thompson. Dean's voice was terse, clipped. "You still out there?" This was supposed to be a quick drop-off. "Yeah, I'm, still out here," Liam replied, trying to keep his frustration in check. "One last house. Then I'm done." "Well, get to it. We don't pay you to take scenic routes. Some of us have families to get home to tonight," Dean said. Then the line went dead. Liam sighed, clenching the steering wheel as he drove through the narrow streets of Pinecrest. He didn't know a soul here, and Pinecrest's empty roads only reinforced how lonely his life had become. Since he'd lost his last job, driving had been his last resort. Maybe he should move on, find something better. His GPS indicated a left turn, but when he made it, he felt more lost than ever. He thought he recognized a house number from the delivery list, but was unsure if he'd taken the correct road. As he pulled up to the curb, a lone figure caught his eye. A boy, no more than 7 or 8, sitting on the steps of a modest-looking house. Liam considered ignoring the kid and heading straight to the door, but something made him stop. The boy looked up at him, his eyes bright against the dim streetlight. "Are you Santa's helper?" the boy asked earnestly. Liam smirked, despite himself. "I'm just the delivery guy. Got a package for the Thompson residence. That's us." The boy's face lit up with a grin. "I'm Elliot. What's in the package?" Liam crouched down, holding the package. "Not sure. Could be anything. But I don't think it's from Santa. I think it's from someone who cares about you." Elliot nodded, then took something small and glittering from his pocket. "Here, you can have this. It's a lucky charm. It'll help you find your way." Liam blinked, surprised by the boy's gesture, but accepted the tiny, worn charm. "Thanks, kid. I'll try not to lose it." Elliot gave him a knowing look. "You'll need it," he said simply. Then he ran back to the house, leaving Liam standing alone in the quiet night. As Liam returned to his truck, the charm felt oddly warm in his hand. He closed his fingers around it, feeling a strange comfort, a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in ages. Settling back into the driver's seat, he placed the charm in the center console, hoping it wouldn't fall off the worn plastic. Turning the key in the ignition, he glanced one last time at Elliot's house. Snowflakes danced in the dim glow of the porch light. He had to admit the town had a certain quiet magic to it. Driving away, he thought about Elliot's innocent words, wondering what the boy had meant. "You'll need it." The words echoed in his mind. A few minutes later, Liam noticed the snowfall was picking up, blanketing the road in a thick, slippery layer. Street signs became harder to see, and every road he took seemed to blend into the next. His GPS blinked, struggling to load directions. Then, in an instant, the screen went black. "No, no, no," Liam muttered, tapping the screen to no avail. Panic started to bubble in his chest as he realized he didn't know how to get back to the main road. The charm Elliot had given him glinted in the dim light, catching his eye, as if reminding him it was there. Feeling absurd, Liam picked it up again, rubbing it with his thumb. As if by instinct, he made a turn down a narrow street. Houses were sparse, the streetlights even sparser. He kept driving, guided by little more than the eerie feeling that he was being drawn somewhere, whether he liked it or not. The snow thickened, and just when he was about to pull over to figure out where he was, he saw a familiar shape up ahead. There, standing on the sidewalk, was Elliot, bundled up in a red scarf and coat, as if he'd been waiting for him. Liam parked and rolled down the window. "Elliot, what are you doing out here?" Elliot shrugged, looking unfazed by the snow. "I told you, you'd need my charm." Liam's eyebrow shot up. "So you followed me?" "Nope," Elliot replied, smiling mysteriously. "I just knew you'd get lost." Liam shook his head, still bewildered. "Well, Now that you've found me, what do I do? Elliot stepped closer, peering through the window. I'll be your guide. But first, let's find someone who needs a little Christmas magic. Tonight, we're delivering joy. The words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning, and Liam felt a strange warmth fill his chest. He glanced at the charm again, realizing that tonight might be about more than just deliveries. Liam hesitated, looking down at Elliot, who stood patiently in the falling snow, seemingly unbothered by the cold. The charm felt strangely warm in his pocket, and without fully understanding why, he nodded, signaling for Elliot to get into the truck. "So, where are we going?" Liam asked, feigning casualness as he gripped the steering wheel. Elliot shrugged, his gaze steady. "To find people who need Christmas." The simplicity of a statement threw Liam off. The snowfall had intensified, making visibility nearly zero, and his nerves prickled as he navigated the unfamiliar streets, hoping to find the main road. As they drove, the snow created an almost otherworldly atmosphere, muffling every sound and making the town feel like an isolated, magical realm. "Don't you need to be home?" Liam asked, glancing over at Elliot, who was looking out the window with a dreamy expression. "Not tonight," Elliot replied, unfazed. "Tonight is for everyone else." As if summoned, a dimly lit sign appeared at the edge of a side street. Greta's Bakery. The glow from the sign looked warm and inviting, and the faint outline of a Christmas tree inside made the place seem alive amidst the snowy silence. Liam pulled up to the curb, his curiosity piqued. "This place is closed." "Not for us," Elliot said confidently, hopping out of the truck and bounding up to the door. The lights inside flickered, and through the frosted window, they saw a woman wiping down tables. She had her back to them, her gray hair tied into a tight bun. Elliot knocked, and after a moment, the woman turned, her expression shifting from surprise to gentle warmth as she recognized the boy. She opened the door. "Elliot!" she exclaimed, her voice kind but weary. "What are you doing out on a night like this?" "Miss Greta, this is my friend Liam. We're delivering Christmas tonight," Elliot announced, beaming. Greta glanced from Elliot to Liam, her expression softening. "Well, come on in. It's warmer inside." They stepped into the bakery, and the cozy smell of cinnamon, nutmeg, and freshly baked bread filled Liam's senses, making him realize just how cold he'd been. Greta, now visibly relaxed, set out mugs of hot cocoa for them. As they sipped, she told them about her husband, who had passed away several years before, and how quiet her Christmases had been ever since. Elliot listened intently, his gaze never leaving Greta, as if he were absorbing every word. "Well, Miss Greta," Elliot said thoughtfully, "you've made Christmas for so many people. Maybe tonight is for you." Liam watched as Greta's eyes misted over, her heart visibly touched by Elliot's words. He felt a stirring in his own chest, a sense of warmth and purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. After bidding Greta farewell, Liam and Elliot stepped back into the snowy night. The bakery's lights dimmed behind them, casting the street back into quiet darkness. Liam felt a strange sense of peace, a sense that somehow they'd given something more than they'd received. Elliot was already scanning the streets, as if seeking the next person who needed a Christmas surprise. "Where to now?" Liam asked, both amused and intrigued by Elliot's mission. Elliot pointed down a narrow street, with only a single streetlight illuminating it. "That way. Someone's waiting." Without a word, Liam drove, letting Elliot's quiet confidence guide him. They didn't go far before another figure appeared, faintly visible in the orange glow of the streetlight. An elderly man sat on a bench, bundled in a thick coat, his breath misting in the cold air as he stared down at something in his hands. "That's Mr. Arthur," Elliot whispered as they approached. "He's a soldier." Liam parked and got out, Elliot following close behind. "Good evening," Liam greeted, his voice soft so as not to startle the man. Mr. Arthur looked up, his face a map of wrinkles and years. "Ah, good evening," he said in a gentle tone, his voice thick with memory. "Didn't expect company tonight." Elliot, undeterred, held out the lucky charm to the elderly man, offering it with a serious expression. "This is for you. It's to keep you safe." Arthur chuckled, a warm, rich sound that echoed down the empty street. "Why, thank you, son, but I think I've had enough luck for a lifetime. Made it back from places some of my friends didn't, you know?" Elliot nodded, a somber understanding beyond his years in his eyes. "You can keep it for them, then." Touched, Arthur reached out, accepting the charm with trembling hands. The three sat in companionable silence as Arthur shared stories of past Christmases spent away from home, of the friends he'd lost, and the memories he'd kept alive. Liam listened, absorbing every word, feeling his own struggles fade in the face of Arthur's quiet strength. Somehow, he felt less alone. As they finally took their leave, Arthur pressed a coin into Elliot's hand, a token of his gratitude, a silent wish for the boy to hold on to hope. As they walked back to the truck, Liam couldn't help but glance at Elliot, who now held the coin Arthur had given him. Elliot twirled it between his fingers, his face thoughtful as they settled into the truck. The snowfall had softened, blanketing the town in a layer of quiet calm, yet Elliot seemed to know exactly where to go next. "Where to now, Captain?" Liam asked, a smirk pulling at his lips. He found himself enjoying Elliot's whimsical approach to their journey, feeling less like a stranger in Pinecrest. Elliot's face lit up, and he pointed down another street. "There's someone else who needs us tonight. They're alone, like Miss Greta." The streets became narrower, lined with tiny, warm-looking shops that had closed hours ago. Soon, they came upon a little house just beyond the business district, with a single dim light glowing in one of the windows. It was the only sign of life in the whole neighborhood. "Who lives here?" Liam asked. "That's Mr. Tom, the baker," Elliot explained. "He lost his family a few years ago, and he's been alone every Christmas since." Liam's heart tightened as he followed Elliot to the front door. He hadn't expected to feel so invested in these strangers' lives, but he found himself eager to make even the smallest difference tonight. Elliot knocked on the door, and after a moment, a thin man with graying hair and gentle eyes opened it. He looked startled to see them, his brows lifting as he took in their unfamiliar faces. "Evening, sir," Liam greeted, holding out his hand. "We were passing by and thought maybe you could use some company." Mr. Tom's surprise melted into a soft, grateful smile. "Well, come in then, both of you," he replied, stepping aside to let them in. Inside, the home was simple, with a modest kitchen and a small living room where the glow of a nearly burned-down candle filled the room with a faint warmth. They sat around Mr. Tom's old dining table, and after a few hesitant words, he began talking about his family, his late wife, who had once filled the home with the smell of gingerbread, and their daughter, who had moved far away. Elliot listened intently, his hands resting quietly on the table. "Mr. Tom, maybe you can bake with us next year," he suggested. "Mom and I could always use help making gingerbread men." Mr. Tom's face softened, his eyes misting over. "You'd invite an old man like me?" he asked, chuckling. Elliot nodded vigorously. "Gingerbread is better with more people. That's what Christmas is about." As they left, Mr. Tom pressed a small loaf of fresh bread into Liam's hands, a silent gift of thanks. Liam felt something shift within him, a sense that he, too, had a place in the world, even if only for tonight. As they walked back to the truck, Liam marveled at the quiet confidence with which Elliot moved through the night, as though he knew every lonely heart in Pinecrest by instinct. The snow crunched softly beneath their boots, muffling their steps as they returned to the main road. Elliot seemed to sense Liam's thoughts. "Everyone has someone they miss," he said, almost to himself. "Christmas isn't the same without them." Liam glanced at him, wondering how such a young boy had developed such wisdom. He opened the truck door for Elliot, and as they both settled in, Liam noticed a faint light at the end of the street, a small house with a single candle burning in the window. The flame flickered against the dark glass, casting shadows that hinted at the memories inside. "Who's that?" Liam asked, nodding toward the house. "That's Mrs. Alvarez," Elliot replied, his voice soft. "She puts that candle out every Christmas. For her family." Without a second thought, Liam drove toward the house, parking outside the small gate. They walked up the path together, and Elliot gently tapped on the door. Mrs. Alvarez answered, her kind face lined with age and softened by a quiet sadness. She recognized Elliot immediately, a faint smile touching her lips. "Elliot, you're out late tonight," she said, glancing curiously at Liam. "We wanted to see you, Mrs. Alvarez," Elliot replied simply. "To wish you a Merry Christmas." She ushered them inside, and they gathered around her modest Christmas tree, which was adorned with mismatched ornaments, each one unique and filled with meaning. Mrs. Alvarez explained that each ornament represented a memory, some for family members who had passed away, some for children and grandchildren who had moved to distant cities. Elliot listened closely, his gaze never leaving her face. When Mrs. Alvarez grew quiet, Elliot carefully took the coin Arthur had given him and placed it in her hand. "From a soldier," he explained, "to remember the ones who are gone." Mrs. Alvarez's eyes filled with tears, and she clutched the coin as though it were a precious gem. "Thank you, Elliot," she whispered, her voice thick with gratitude. As they left, Mrs. Alvarez's candle burned brighter than ever, casting a warm glow through the snowy night. Liam felt the familiar tightness in his chesties, replaced by a profound sense of purpose. Elliot's mission was simple, yet it had given him something he hadn't felt in years: hope. As they left Mrs. Alvarez's house, Liam felt an unexpected peace settle over him, the weight of his worries replaced with something warmer and more hopeful. Elliot walked beside him, quiet and thoughtful, as they made their way back to the truck. Just as he opened the driver's door, Liam's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The screen lit up with Dean, his supervisor's name, filling him with a sharp pang of irritation. He answered reluctantly, hoping the conversation would be quick. "Thompson, where have you been?" Dean's voice crackled with impatience. "You were supposed to be finished an hour ago. We're not paying you to take a Christmas vacation out there." Liam gritted his teeth, glancing over at Elliot, who was busy watching snowflakes melt on his glove. "I got a little delayed. Roads are pretty bad. Bad or not, you're still on company time," Dean snapped. "Just finish the deliveries and get back here, understood? Some of us don't have time to waste." Without waiting for Liam's reply, Dean ended the call. For a moment, the silence seemed louder than it had before, as if the night itself had held its breath. Liam sighed, slipping the phone back into his pocket, his moment of peace disrupted. "Was that your boss?" Elliot asked, looking up at him with an innocent curiosity. Liam hesitated, not wanting to burden Elliot with the details. "Yeah, he's just worried about his deliveries." Elliot's eyes sparkled with mischief. "But we're delivering something better than packages, right?" Liam smiled, the boy's perspective lightening his mood. "Yeah, we are." And in that moment, he decided that he wasn't going to let Dean's impatience spoil what they'd accomplished tonight. Elliot was right. Some things mattered more than his job, and tonight was one of those times. As he started the truck, he glanced over at Elliot, whose gaze was already scanning the snow-covered streets, searching for their next destination. They continued down the road, letting the night guide them. Driving along the quiet, snow-laden streets, Liam was beginning to trust Elliot's instincts, almost as if the boy had a sixth sense for those who needed a little Christmas magic. They drove in comfortable silence until Elliot suddenly pointed down a side street. "Stop here," he said, excitement coloring his voice. Liam obliged, pulling over to the curb and peering down the dimly lit street. At first, he didn't see anything unusual, just the row of small, decorated houses and the glimmer of holiday lights through frosted windows. But then, a soft whimper caught his ear. Turning, he saw a young girl standing in the snow, calling softly and looking distraught. Elliot jumped out of the truck, waving for Liam to follow. They approached the girl, who looked up with wide, teary eyes, clutching a leash in one hand. "Hi," Elliot greeted gently. "What's wrong?" The girl sniffed, wiping her eyes. "My dog, Max, he ran away. I thought I saw him go down this way, but I can't find him, and my parents are asleep, and he's probably so cold." Elliot shot a determined look at Liam. "We can help find Max." "Right." Without hesitation, Liam nodded. He could see how much Max meant to her, and he wasn't about to let her down. "Do you know which way he went?" The girl pointed down a narrow path, her expression hopeful. "I thought he went that way." They searched the winding paths together, calling Max's name, their voices echoing through the quiet streets. As the snowfall deepened, Liam almost thought they'd lost him. But then, he heard a faint bark. "There!" Elliot shouted, dashing toward the sound. Liam and the girl followed, hearts pounding with anticipation. Sure enough, they found Max tangled in a low bush, his small frame shivering but unharmed. The girl let out a joyful cry, rushing forward to untangle her pet. She hugged Max tightly, murmuring reassurances as his tail wagged furiously. Elliot beamed, and even Liam couldn't suppress his grin. "Thank you," the girl whispered, looking at Liam and Elliot with gratitude shining in her eyes. "You found him. You're like Christmas angels." The phrase struck a chord within Liam. Here he was working a job he didn't even like, yet somehow, tonight, he felt like he was part of something important, something lasting. As they walked back to the truck, Elliot glanced at him, eyes twinkling. "I told you, Christmas is about finding things." "Guess you're right, kid," Liam replied, feeling the truth of those words in his bones. Tonight, he was finding parts of himself he hadn't known he'd lost. With Max safely returned to his owner and the warmth of her gratitude still lingering in his heart, Liam drove on through the quiet streets, feeling a growing sense of purpose with each stop. The snow had finally eased, leaving a blanket of white that sparkled under the soft glow of the streetlights. Elliot gazed out the window, watching the peaceful town pass by, when suddenly he pointed to a small house on the corner of Maple and Pinecrest. It was a quaint, cozy-looking place with a Christmas tree visible through the living room window, adorned with what seemed to be hundreds of ornaments. The soft glow of colored lights illuminated each one, casting warm hues into the night. "That's Mrs. Alvarez's house," Elliot said, his tone reverent. "She decorates her tree with all the memories of her life." Liam raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "All her memories?" Elliot nodded, his gaze never leaving the house. "Each ornament is for someone she loved, something she remembers. She lost her family long ago, but she keeps them close with the tree." Without hesitation, Liam parked the truck and they walked up to the front door. Elliot knocked gently, and after a moment, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile opened the door. Mrs. Alvarez recognized Elliot immediately, her face lighting up as she welcomed them inside. "Elliot, and who's this with you?" she asked, glancing curiously at Liam. "This is my friend Liam," Elliot explained. "We're delivering Christmas tonight." Mrs. Alvarez's eyes softened, and she invited them to sit beside the tree. Liam glanced around the room, noticing each ornament's unique detail, some shaped like animals, others decorated with pictures or old-fashioned designs. The ornaments spanned decades, and their combined glow gave the room an ethereal warmth. "This tree is beautiful," Liam said softly, feeling the weight of the memories held within its branches. Mrs. Alvarez nodded, her gaze drifting over the tree with a mixture of fondness and sorrow. "I make one new ornament each year to honor the people I've lost and the memories I've kept. Some of these are for my parents, my husband, my sister. Each ornament has a story." Elliot listened intently, his small face thoughtful. "Maybe Christmas can be for remembering, too." Liam, touched by Elliot's insight, realized how much he'd been avoiding his own memories. Mrs. Alvarez picked up an old ornament shaped like a small dove, its paint chipped but still beautiful. "This one was my husband's," she whispered. "He gave it to me on our first Christmas together. Every year, it reminds me of the love we shared." The quiet moments settled over them, and Liam felt a sense of peace he hadn't known he needed. When it was time to leave, Mrs. Alvarez pressed a small, handmade ornament into Elliot's hand, a simple, hand-carved star. "For your tree, Elliot," she said, "so you can remember this Christmas, too." As they stepped back into the cold night air, Liam noticed Elliot clutching the small star ornament tightly in his hand, his gaze distant. They walked silently to the truck, both lost in thought. Liam had barely closed the door when his phone buzzed again. The screen flashed in, and Liam hesitated, knowing exactly what his boss wanted to discuss. "Guess I better answer this," he muttered, reluctantly pressing the call button. "Thompson," Dean's voice barked over the line. "You're hours behind schedule. What's the hold-up?" Liam glanced at Elliot, who was watching him quietly, and felt an inexplicable urge to defend the journey they'd taken together tonight. But he knew Dean wouldn't understand. "There were, complications," Liam replied, trying to keep his tone steady. "Complications." Dean's frustration was clear. "Look, you either finish the job or don't bother coming back at all. We don't pay for half-done deliveries." Liam's grip on the phone tightened. He knew he needed the job, but the thought of turning his back on this Christmas mission felt impossible. The connections he'd made tonight felt more meaningful than any paycheck. "Maybe I won't come back," Liam said, surprising himself as much as Dean. "Maybe I'm done." Dean's silence was brief. Then he scoffed. "Fine. Suit yourself. Merry Christmas, Thompson." The call ended abruptly, leaving Liam feeling an odd mix of fear and freedom. He turned to Elliot, who was watching him with quiet approval, as though he'd known Liam's decision before he did. "Are you okay?" Elliot asked softly. Liam managed a small smile. "Yeah, kid, I think I am." With no obligations to rush back, Liam felt a newfound sense of liberation. They drove slowly through the snowy streets, letting the town guide them to wherever they were needed next. As they passed the town's small church, a faint glow drew their attention. Curious, Liam parked, and they made their way up the stone path to the church's doors. Inside, candles flickered softly in the dim light, illuminating a single figure sitting in one of the pews, Pastor Neil, a man known for his warmth and generosity. Noticing them, Pastor Neil rose, a gentle smile on his face. "Elliot, my boy, and who's your friend?" "This is Liam," Elliot introduced, his tone filled with pride. "We're spreading Christmas around town tonight." Pastor Neil chuckled, nodding with understanding. "Well, there's no better time for it. The world could always use a little more kindness." They sat together, and the pastor spoke of the true meaning of Christmas: hope, love, and the strength to give even when it's hard. The candles around them cast long shadows, creating an atmosphere that felt timeless and comforting. As they left, Elliot lit a candle, whispering a wish for happiness for the people they'd met tonight. Liam followed his lead, lighting a candle and closing his eyes, silently hoping for the courage to continue down the path he'd chosen. The warmth of the church and the soft glow of the candles lingered with Liam and Elliot as they stepped back into the night. Liam felt a peacefulness he hadn't known in years, a sense that, for the first time in a long time, he was exactly where he needed to be. Elliot, clutching the small star ornament from Mrs. Alvarez, seemed content, as if tonight's journey was unfolding just as he had hoped. They continued down the snowy streets until Elliot tugged on Liam's sleeve, nodding toward a narrow alley lit only by the soft glow of a single streetlight. Curious, Liam followed Elliot's lead, peering down the dim alley where a figure hunched against the cold. It was a man, bundled in a threadbare coat, shivering beneath a makeshift shelter of cardboard and old blankets. Without hesitation, Elliot approached, his steps confident. The man looked up, his face tired and weathered, but alert as he took in Elliot and Liam's presence. "Good evening," Liam said softly, kneeling down beside him. "We're out sharing some Christmas cheer. Mind if we join you for a bit?" The man studied them, surprise flickering in his eyes, then nodded slowly. Elliot sat beside him, his small frame dwarfed by the man's rough appearance, but his expression showed no fear, only kindness. "My name's Elliot," he introduced, extending his hand as though they were old friends. "And this is Liam." The man took Elliot's hand in his own, his expression softening. "Name's Frank," he replied, his voice rough but grateful. "Been a long time since anyone's wanted to share Christmas with me." They spoke quietly, and Frank shared snippets of his story: a lost job, a strange family, and a series of misfortunes that had left him alone on these cold streets. Liam listened, his heart heavy but filled with a strange hope as he realized the power of simply being there for someone. He remembered the old gloves in his truck's console and, without a second thought, offered them to Frank. "These might help keep you warm," Liam said, passing them over. Frank's eyes misted as he accepted the gloves, pulling them on and flexing his fingers in the warmth. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with gratitude. "You two have given me more kindness than I've known in a long time." As they left, Frank's expression remained etched in Liam's mind. Tonight was more than just a journey. It was a chance to bring light to lives that needed it most. The silence between them as they walked back to the truck was comfortable, filled with the unspoken understanding that tonight's mission was changing them both. Liam glanced over at Elliot, feeling a kinship with the boy that he couldn't quite put into words. Here was a child who, despite his youth, seemed to understand the weight of loneliness and the joy of simple kindness. As they settled back in the truck, Elliot pointed up the road. "There's one more place we need to go." Liam nodded, trusting Elliot's instincts, and drove in the direction the boy indicated. They soon found themselves on the edge of town, where an old, weathered house stood alone, the windows dark and silent. "Who lives here?" Liam asked, noticing the abandoned look of the property. "A lady named Mrs. Porter," Elliot explained, his tone soft. "She doesn't come into town much. I don't think anyone's visited her for a long time." Intrigued, Liam parked the truck and followed Elliot up the cracked walkway, feeling an odd mix of excitement and trepidation. Elliot knocked gently, and after a long pause, they heard shuffling footsteps approaching from inside. The door creaked open, and a frail woman peered out, her face etched with lines of age and sorrow. Her eyes narrowed at first, suspicious, but softened as she recognized Elliot's friendly face. "Elliot," she murmured, her voice quivering. "What brings you here tonight?" Elliot stepped forward, offering the small star ornament from Mrs. Alvarez. "We're delivering Christmas," he said, his words carrying a weight that belied his years. "And this is for you." Mrs. Porter's hand trembled as she took the star, her eyes filling with tears as she held the delicate ornament. She led them inside, and they sat in a cozy living room filled with memories, photos of family members who had passed, an old armchair covered with a handmade quilt, and shelves filled with dusty books and knickknacks. As they spoke, Mrs. Porter shared stories of her life, of family gatherings in that very room, of laughter and love now long gone. Liam noticed how her voice softened as she remembered happier times, and he realized that tonight they were offering her not just company, but a connection to a world she thought she'd lost. When it was time to leave, Mrs. Porter hugged Elliot tightly, her frail arms filled with gratitude. Liam felt the weight of the moment as he watched, knowing that this night, though brief, had given her something meaningful, a reason to remember the joy of Christmas once more. As they made their way back to the truck, Liam felt the fullness of the journey settle into his heart. Tonight had been more than a series of visits. It had been a reminder of the power of small acts of kindness, the kind that could light up even the darkest corners of life. The night grew quieter as Liam and Elliot returned to the truck. The warmth of their encounters lingered in the stillness, filling Liam with an unexpected sense of contentment. Each person they'd visited had added a layer of meaning to the evening, leaving a mark that felt as indelible as the snow blanketing the town. Liam glanced over at Elliot, who was gazing out the window, lost in thought. After a moment, he noticed the boy's shoulders were tense, his expression thoughtful, yet somehow distant. "Hey," Liam said softly, breaking the silence. "You doing okay?" Elliot hesitated, then nodded slowly, though he didn't meet Liam's eyes. Sometimes I wish I could feel Christmas the way I used to. It was different when." He trailed off, his voice catching in his throat. Liam waited, sensing Elliot had more to share. Finally, the boy continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "When my dad was here, we'd wait up for Santa together. He'd tell me stories, and it made everything feel magical. But he's been gone for a while now." The confession hit Liam like a jolt. Suddenly, everything made sense. The boy's quiet wisdom, his mission to bring joy to others, his almost instinctive understanding of loneliness. Elliot wasn't just spreading Christmas cheer for others. He was seeking something he, too, had lost. "I'm sorry, Elliot," Liam said, his voice full of empathy. "I didn't know." Elliot managed a small, sad smile, shrugging. It's okay. Mom works a lot, so I just thought maybe if I could help someone else feel happy, I'd feel it too, you know? Liam nodded, his heart aching at the boy's words. Here was a child who had known loss, and somehow transformed it into a mission of kindness, of connection. Liam realized he was more than just a guide for tonight. Elliot was teaching him to see the world in a way he hadn't in years. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Liam reached out, resting a gentle hand on Elliot's shoulder. You're doing something really special, Elliot. And if it means anything, tonight's been the best Christmas I've had in a long time. Elliot's smile grew, genuine this time, and they shared a quiet understanding. Tonight, they weren't just delivering joy to others. They were helping each other find it too. The night had deepened, the town now blanketed in a serene stillness as Liam drove on. Elliot seemed to have regained his usual light-hearted spirit, his eyes once again scanning the snowy streets, as if sensing one more place that needed their visit. We're almost done, Elliot murmured, his voice thoughtful. But there's one last stop. They arrived at a small, solitary house on the edge of town, its windows glowing faintly through curtains drawn against the cold. Liam parked, feeling a sense of anticipation mixed with wonder. He sensed this final stop held something significant. They walked up the narrow pathway, and Elliot knocked gently. After a moment, an elderly woman opened the door, her face lined with age but softened by a gentle smile. She looked surprised but pleased to see them, her gaze warming as she took in Elliot's cheerful face. "Good evening," Liam greeted, offering her a warm smile. "We're out sharing a bit of Christmas cheer tonight, and we thought we'd stop by." The woman nodded, her voice soft with a hint of weariness. "Well, it's been a long time since I've had visitors on Christmas Eve. Please, come in." They stepped inside, and the woman led them into a small, cozy living room where a simple Christmas tree stood by the window, decorated with handmade ornaments that looked like they had been cherished for years. She motioned for them to sit, and they settled in, feeling the warmth of her home seep into their bones. "My name's Mary," she introduced herself, her voice gentle but filled with a quiet strength. "It's been a quiet Christmas for me, so your visit is a lovely surprise." Elliot smiled, handing her the star ornament from his pocket. "This is for you, Miss Mary, to remind you of all the stars in the sky that light up on Christmas." Mary took the ornament, her eyes misting over as she held it delicately, as though it were made of something far more precious. "Thank you, Elliot. You've given me something very special tonight." As they spoke, Mary shared stories of her past, of family gatherings filled with laughter and joy, of people who had come and gone, leaving behind memories as lasting as the ornaments on her tree. Liam felt an overwhelming sense of peace listening to her, reminded of the simple beauty in connections and shared stories. When it was time to leave, Mary clasped their hands, her voice filled with gratitude. "You've brought more than just Christmas to me tonight. You've brought me hope." Outside, Liam and Elliot shared a quiet smile. They both knew that Mary's words carried a meaning that stretched beyond Christmas. They had shared hope and kindness, small gestures that meant everything to those who received them. The first light of dawn was beginning to break over the town as Liam and Elliot walked back to the truck for the final time. The snow-covered streets were now bathed in a soft, pinkish glow, and Pinecrest looked like something out of a Christmas card, serene and beautiful. Liam settled into the driver's seat, a quiet smile on his face. He glanced over at Elliot, who seemed both content and a little sleepy. "Looks like we did it, huh?" he murmured. Elliot nodded, his eyes bright with satisfaction. "Yeah, we found everyone who needed Christmas." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the sunrise color the world outside. For the first time in a long time, Liam felt a deep sense of peace, a feeling that he was part of something bigger than himself. This Christmas Eve had been more than just a job. It had been a journey of rediscovery, one that reminded him of the power of kindness and connection. After a while, Liam turned to Elliot. "So, what now? Should I take you home?" Elliot smiled softly, as though he'd known this question would come. "I think I can find my way from here." Before Liam could respond, the door to the truck opened, and Mrs. Thompson, Elliot's mother, approached them. Her face was filled with a mixture of relief and gratitude, her eyes misty as she looked at her son. She reached out, pulling Elliot into a warm embrace. "Thank you for watching over him," she said to Liam, her voice soft but sincere. "I know he wanted to do something special tonight." Liam smiled, understanding now that this journey had been as much for him as it had been for Elliot. "He's a remarkable kid," he replied. "I'm the one who should be thanking him." Mrs. Thompson chuckled softly, holding her son close. "Elliot has a way of seeing people, of understanding what they need. I think he learned that from his father." At the mention of Elliot's father, Liam felt a pang of sadness mixed with admiration. This young boy, who had known loss so deeply, had somehow chosen to bring light into others' lives. Liam realized that this quality, this choice to spread kindness, was something he, too, could carry forward. As Mrs. Thompson led Elliot back home, the boy turned, giving Liam one last wave. In that small gesture, Liam sensed a bond that went beyond words, a shared experience that had changed them both. With a deep breath, Liam climbed back into the truck, but he didn't feel lost this time. Instead, he felt the warmth of the connections he'd made with each person, a warmth that gave him a new sense of purpose. Back in town, Liam decided to stop at a small cafe that had just opened its doors for the morning. Inside, the air was filled with the smell of fresh coffee and baked goods, and he found himself smiling as he ordered a cup. Sitting by the window, he gazed out at the quiet streets, reflecting on the night. He was surprised when a familiar voice called out, "Liam, good to see you here." He looked up to see Mr. Tom, the baker they'd visited the night before. The man's face was filled with warmth, and Liam was struck by the sense of community he suddenly felt in this place he'd once considered only a stopover. "Mind if I join you?" Mr. Tom asked, sliding into the seat across from him. "Of course," Liam replied, his smile genuine. "Nice to see a familiar face." As they chatted, Mr. Tom spoke of his plans to reopen the bakery with new recipes and decorations inspired by the warmth Elliot had brought to his life. He invited Liam to come by any time, promising he'd always have fresh bread waiting. One by one, other townsfolk entered, many of whom Liam recognized from the night before. Miss Greta the baker, Mrs. Alvarez, with a small but vibrant smile, even Frank, the man they'd found in the alley, now wearing Liam's old gloves and looking much warmer and more hopeful. Each greeted him as though he were part of the town's fabric, as if he'd always belonged. As the cafe filled with the gentle hum of conversation, Liam felt a newfound sense of purpose settle over him. He knew now that his journey wasn't over. This was only the beginning. Later that morning, Liam received an unexpected offer from the local community center, where they needed a driver for their meal delivery program. With a new understanding of what it meant to serve others, he accepted, knowing that he'd found a role that felt meaningful and right. And so, Liam stayed in Pinecrest, forging bonds with the people he'd met that night, helping deliver not just food, but connection and kindness. The memories of that Christmas Eve would remain with him always, a reminder of how one night and one little boy's vision had changed his life. As for Elliot, he continued his mission of kindness, bringing warmth and joy to all those he met. Together, they'd shared a Christmas that none of Pinecrest's residents would forget, a night filled with hope, laughter, and the quiet magic that comes from shared humanity. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It really helps us bring you more stories just like this one. Also, we'd love to hear from you. What part of a story had the biggest impact on you? Let us know in the comments. And if you have ideas or suggestions for future stories, drop them below. We're always looking for new ideas and can't wait to see what you'd like to hear next. Thanks for being part of our storytelling community.